What would you do if you were cursed to be ugly from birth without any reason? No one understands your pain, and the world turns its back on you. This is what happened to Ngozi in this gripping African folktale. But her story doesn't end there. Ngozi did something no one expected. She found a way to turn her curse into power. Watch until the end to see how she got her sweet, unforgettable revenge on those who wronged her. Today's tale takes place in Owerri, Nigeria. Where are you watching from? Share any popular stories from your country in the comments. And before we dive in, if you want to join our growing folktale family, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now so you never miss a story. Part 1. The Curse of Ugliness. The sky above ancient Owerri was a patchwork of bruised clouds, swollen and pregnant with the promise of rain. The air was heavy and thick, buzzing with the sounds of insects and the distant chants of the market women whose voices rose and fell like the tides of the great river Niger. It was in this setting, where the land was fertile and the traditions ran deep, that Ngozi's story began, a story steeped in magic, curses, and forbidden desires. Ngozi's mother, Nwachi, was once the most beautiful woman in all of Owerri. She was the kind of beauty that could silence a room, the kind that made men forget themselves and women whisper in envy. Her skin was the color of rich, dark earth, glowing like the fertile soil after the first rains of the season. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, sparkled like the stars that dotted the night sky. She walked with the grace of a gazelle and spoke with the voice of the river, a soft, melodic hum that wrapped around the hearts of all who heard her. It was not long before Nwachi's beauty caught the attention of the most powerful men in the land, chiefs, traders, and even priests who whispered prayers and burnt offerings in her name. But none were more smitten than Obinna, a wealthy chief who was determined to make her his wife. Obinna was a man of great wealth and influence. His lands stretched far beyond the horizon, and his barns were filled to the brim with yams, palm oil, and treasures from distant lands. He showered Nwachi with gifts, golden anklets, beaded necklaces, and silken fabrics from faraway kingdoms. But Nwachi was not interested in Obinna's riches. Her heart was set on Chike, a young and handsome warrior whose courage was matched only by his love for her. Obinna, blinded by jealousy and pride, sought the counsel of an old and powerful sorceress who lived deep in the mangrove swamps. She was known as Adamma, the Witch of the Black Waters, feared by all for her dark magic and the whispers that surrounded her name. Obinna pleaded with Adamma, offering her gold and livestock in exchange for a potion that would make Nwachi forget Chike and fall into his arms. But the witch, with her sharp, crow-like eyes and her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind, offered him something else instead, a curse. "If I cannot have her, then neither shall he," Obinna had said, his voice laced with bitterness. Adamma agreed, but her price was steep. She demanded Obinna's firstborn child as payment, a promise he would regret making in his rage. The curse was subtle, like the slow coil of a snake around its prey. Nwachi's womb, once blessed with the promise of beauty, was twisted by Adamma's dark magic. When the time came for Nwachi to give birth, the midwives gasped and recoiled. Ngozi emerged, not as the beautiful child Nwachi had dreamed of, but as a living testament to the curse. Ngozi was unlike any other child in the village. Her skin was uneven, marred by patches of dark spots that no ointment or herbal concoction could fade. Her eyes, a pale, unsettling shade of yellow, were always a little too wide, too hungry, as if searching for something they could never find. Her nose was flat and broad, and her teeth, crooked and uneven, jutted out in a way that made her smile more a grimace than a gesture of warmth. Her hair was thin and unruly, a wild tangle that resisted every attempt to be tamed. The villagers whispered that she looked more like a creature of the forest than a child of man, and they avoided her gaze as if afraid of what they might see. Nwachi, heartbroken and tormented by guilt, tried everything to reverse the curse. She visited healers, made offerings to the gods, and even sought out Adamma herself, pleading for mercy. But the witch merely laughed, her eyes glittering with malice. "The curse is not mine to undo," she said. "Your child's fate is sealed by the choices of men." Ngozi grew up in the shadow of her mother's shame, an unwanted reminder of the dark magic that had tainted her birth. She was shunned by the other children who called her names and threw stones when they thought she wasn't looking. The women of the village clucked their tongues and crossed themselves when she passed, muttering prayers against evil. No one looked at her with love, not even her own mother, who could barely meet her eyes without flinching. Part 2. The Herb of Obedience. As Ngozi grew older, her bitterness grew like a weed, twisted and unrelenting. She spent her days alone, wandering the edges of the village and listening to the tales of the old medicine men who spoke of herbs and potions that could change one's fate. She knew every root and leaf that grew in the forests surrounding Ikwere, and she spent countless nights under the moonlight, grinding them into powders and pastes, hoping to find something that would make her beautiful. But nothing worked. One day, as Ngozi rummaged through her mother's old belongings, she found something strange. A small pouch made of woven fibers, hidden beneath the layers of her mother's red and white wrapper. Inside was a dried herb, brittle and faintly green, wrapped in a cloth stained with old, rust-colored spots. Along with it was a faded parchment, covered in words written in a script that seemed as old as time itself. When Nwachi found Ngozi with the herb, she snatched it away with a trembling hand. Her eyes, usually so filled with wariness, flashed with fear and anger. "Where did you find this?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Ngozi, defiant and curious, refused to back down. "It was yours," she replied, her eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Nwachi hesitated, torn between the need to protect her daughter and the fear of what would happen if she knew the truth. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping as if carrying the weight of 1,000 regrets. "This herb was given to me by an old seeress when I was young," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "It is called Nkukoojo, Herb of Obedience. Anyone who consumes it will obey the first command they hear, without question, without hesitation. But it is dangerous, Ngozi. It is not meant to be used lightly." Ngozi listened, her mind racing. She could feel the gears turning, the possibilities unfolding before her, like the opening petals of a night blooming flower. A plan began to take shape, one that would allow her to take back what she felt the world had denied her. The next morning, Ngozi set her plan into motion. She found a man, a wealthy trader named Okonkwo, who was known throughout Ikwere for his vast riches and his ruthless business acumen. He was tall and imposing, with broad shoulders and a stern face, but Ngozi knew his greatest weakness, his love of food. She prepared a meal, rich and fragrant, laced with the ground herb, and offered it to him with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Okonkwo, greedy and unsuspecting, devoured the food without a second thought. As he ate, Ngozi watched, her heart pounding. When he finished, he looked up, his eyes glazed, waiting for her next words. "Give me your diamond," Ngozi commanded, her voice steady and sure. Okonkwo, without blinking, reached into the folds of his robes and pulled out a diamond, a large, brilliant stone that caught the light and sparkled like the stars that filled the night sky. He placed it in her hands without a word, his face blank, his will bent to her command. Ngozi stared at the diamond, feeling the weight of it in her palm, the cold, hard reality of power coursing through her veins. For the first time in her life, she felt something akin to satisfaction. This was only the beginning, she thought. The world had made her ugly, but now she had the means to make it bend to her will. So far, Ngozi has faced nothing but scorn and pain, but the story is about to take a thrilling turn. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Comment below. Fun fact, did you know that in Ikwere culture, revenge isn't always what it seems? If you're enjoying this tale, tap that like button and join our folktale family by subscribing. You won't want to miss what happens next. Part 3. The Eatery Under the Tree. Ngozi's eatery opened quietly one morning under the broad, leafy canopy of an ancient Iroko tree that had stood for centuries beside the bustling Ikwere market. The tree was a silent witness to the everyday hustle of the village, its roots thick and gnarled like the wrinkled hands of an elder. From dawn till dusk, the market teemed with life. The clattering of traders hawking their wares, the laughter of children chasing each other around stalls, and the rich, mingling scents of roasted yam, smoked fish, and spices that hung heavy in the warm air. Ngozi had chosen this spot deliberately, knowing that it was the perfect place to catch the eyes of weary men after a long day of bargaining and trading. Her eatery was modest, just a few wooden benches and tables shaded by the tree's thick branches, but it was the food that drew people in. Ngozi's cooking was exceptional, filled with the rich flavors of herbs and spices that she had learned to master over the years. She prepared dishes that made the mouth water, pepper soup that warmed the soul, jollof rice bursting with the taste of tomatoes and chili, and tender goat meat that melted off the bone. But the real secret ingredient was the herb, ground finely and hidden within the food, waiting to weave its magic. The rich men of Ekwere were drawn to her like moths to a flame. They came dressed in fine robes and sandals, their fingers adorned with rings of gold and silver, their voices loud with the boasting of recent conquests in the market. They ate with relish, tearing into her meals as if they had not eaten in days. And after they had sated their hunger, Ngozi would lean in, her eyes fixed intently on theirs, and speak the simple command that she knew they could not resist. "Give me some of your money." One by one, the men obeyed, reaching into their leather pouches and pulling out cowries, coins, and sometimes even small gold trinkets. They handed them to her without a second thought, their faces blank and docile, as if they had been robbed of their free will. Ngozi accepted the offerings with a calm smile, tucking the wealth into the folds of her wrapper. She knew each man would wake the next day with no memory of what he had done, his mind unable to comprehend how his riches had mysteriously vanished. The days turned into weeks, and soon Ngozi's coffers were swelling. Her reputation as a savvy businesswoman spread through Ekwere, and no one questioned how she had come into such wealth so quickly. The men who frequented her eatery never spoke of their losses, too embarrassed or too confused to admit that they could not remember what had happened to their money. And so Ngozi's power grew, and she watched the villagers who once shunned her now come to her for favors, seeking her good graces like they would a chief's. It was on a particularly humid evening, when the air was thick with the scent of rain and the marketplace was beginning to quiet down, that Ugana, the second son of Obinna, found himself drawn to Ngozi's eatery. Ugana was a handsome man in his late 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a tall, muscular frame. Daki was known for his shrewdness in the market and his ambitious nature, traits that had earned him a respected position among the traders of Ekwere. Ugana had spent the entire day haggling over the price of imported beads and fine cloth, and his body was weary with the fatigue of endless negotiations. As he approached the tree, he saw Ngozi's eatery, and, drawn by the tempting aroma of freshly cooked food, decided to take a seat. He ordered a bowl of goat pepper soup, its fiery scent tingling his nostrils, and a plate of yam pottage rich with palm oil and seasoned to perfection. Ngozi served him personally, her eyes lingering a moment too long on his face. She recognized him instantly. Obinna's son, the son of the man who had ruined her mother's life. But she kept her face neutral, offering only a polite smile as Ugana ate heartily, too distracted by the delicious flavors to notice the strange herbs mixed into his meal. When Ugana finished, he leaned back, satisfied, but before he could rise to leave, Ngozi's voice cut through the fading evening light. "Give me some of your money," she said, her tone smooth and commanding. Ugana's eyes glazed over, and he reached into his satchel without a word. He pulled out a handful of coins and a small gold chain, items he had earned through hours of hard bargaining. He handed them to Ngozi, his face blank and expressionless, as if he were in a trance. Ngozi took the offerings with a nod, her heart swelling with a sense of vindication. Here was the son of the man who had cursed her mother, now helpless in her grasp. She watched Ugana walk away, knowing that he would remember nothing of this exchange the next day. Part 4. The Night Watch. Amaka, Ugana's wife, was a woman of beauty and strength. She was known throughout Ekwere for her quick wit and sharp tongue, qualities that often clashed with her husband's stern demeanor. Amaka's skin was the color of polished ebony, smooth and flawless, and her eyes, large and expressive, often sparkled with mischief and curiosity. She kept her home meticulously, overseeing every detail from the cooking to the care of their children. But lately, she had noticed something peculiar about her husband. For the past few weeks, Ugana had been waking in the dead of night, leaving their bed and wandering off into the darkness. Amaka would stir awake to find him slipping quietly out of the house, his movements slow and deliberate as though in a dream. When she questioned him in the mornings, Ugonna would look at her with genuine confusion, unable to recall anything of the previous night's events. "It must be stress," he would say dismissively, rubbing his temples. "The market has been busy." Amaka wanted to believe him, but her suspicions only grew when she began to notice her precious jewelry going missing. Pieces that had been passed down from her mother, gold earrings, coral beads, and her prized ivory bracelet, all gone with her. She searched the entire house, questioning the servants and even her children, but no one had seen anything. It was as if the jewelry had simply vanished into thin air. Unable to sleep one night, Amaka watched Ugonna rise once more, his movements slow and mechanical. She knew then that something was terribly wrong. Fearing her husband was being blackmailed or threatened, Amaka decided to seek help. She called upon Anya, the village night watchman, a grizzled old warrior with a scar that ran down his left cheek like a lightning bolt. Anya had served Ikwere for decades, patrolling the village streets with the watchful eyes of a hawk. "I need you to follow my husband tonight," Amaka said, her voice firm but laced with worry. "Something is wrong, and I need to know what." Anya agreed without hesitation, his loyalty to the village and its people unquestionable. That night, as darkness swallowed the village and the moon hung high and pale in the sky, Amaka and Anya trailed Ugonna from a distance, careful not to make a sound. They watched as he moved through the narrow paths of the village, his steps slow and unsteady, as if guided by an invisible force. Amaka's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with all the terrible possibilities of what awaited them. They followed Ugonna to the outskirts of the market, where the trees stood tall and the shadows ran long. To Amaka's shock, she saw Ngozi waiting there, her figure barely illuminated by the faint light of a dying lantern. Ugonna approached her, his eyes blank, and without a word, he pulled out a small pouch from the folds of his robe. He opened it, revealing Amaka's missing jewelry, pieces that sparkled faintly in the dim light. One by one, Ugonna handed the items to Ngozi, who accepted them with a sly, triumphant smile. Amaka stepped out of the shadows, fury blazing in her eyes. "What is this? What have you done to him?" she shouted, her voice breaking the stillness of the night. Ngozi, caught off guard, turned to flee, but Anya moved quickly, grabbing her by the arm. She struggled, her heart racing, but in a desperate bid, Ngozi pulled a small leaf of the herb from her pocket and shoved it into Anya's mouth. He coughed, but before he could spit it out, Ngozi's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Go home," she ordered. To Amaka's horror, Anya's grip loosened, and he turned away without another word. His eyes were glassy, and his expression vacant as he started to walk back towards the village, following Ugonna, who had already begun his slow, hypnotized march home. "No! Stop!" Amaka screamed, but her cries fell on deaf ears. The men continued on, oblivious, leaving Amaka standing alone with Ngozi, who watched her with a calm, knowing gaze. The next morning, Amaka stormed into the village council demanding justice. She recounted everything she had seen, every stolen item, every unnatural action of her husband. But when the elders questioned Ugonna, he remembered nothing. Anya, too, could recall none of the events of the night, insisting that he had simply returned home after his patrol. With no evidence beyond Amaka's frantic words, the council elders exchanged troubled glances, their faces lined with skepticism. They were men of tradition, wary of accusations without proof, especially those involving dark magic and curses that could stir fear and unrest in the village. Chief Ozoamina, the oldest and most respected of the council, leaned forward, his weathered face shadowed by the flickering torchlight. He stroked his gray beard thoughtfully, his eyes narrowing as he addressed Amaka. "You speak of things that no man should meddle in lightly," he said, his voice deep and measured. "But we cannot condemn a person without evidence. Magic or no magic, the law must be upheld. If you have no witnesses who can testify with clear memories, then we have no choice but to let this matter rest." Amaka's face burned with frustration. She is using something, some herb that makes men obey her. "I've seen it with my own eyes. My husband is not himself. How can you just ignore that?" Chief Ozomina sighed, his eyes softening with a hint of pity. "We do not ignore Amaka. We simply have no proof. Without a witness who remembers, without any physical evidence, our hands are tied. We are not gods. We cannot see what is hidden in shadows." Ngozi stood quietly in the corner, her face a mask of calm. She watched as Amaka pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. Ngozi knew she was untouchable here. She had been careful. There were no herbs left at the scene, no lingering traces of magic that could be caught or questioned. The council could do nothing but dismiss the case, and she would walk away once more, free to continue her plans. Amaka stormed out of the council chamber, her mind racing. She had seen the truth with her own eyes, yet no one believed her. The villagers whispered as she passed, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. In their eyes, she was a woman who had been humiliated, a wife who had lost control of her husband, and a storyteller who spoke of things too strange to believe. But Amaka knew that she was not defeated. She vowed silently to find a way to expose Ngozi's deceit, to bring the truth to light, no matter what it took. Ngozi watched Amaka's retreating figure with a mix of satisfaction and caution. She had won this battle, but she could feel the walls closing in. She knew Amaka would not stop, and the council's dismissal would only fan the flames of her determination. Ngozi would have to be more careful now, more cunning, but she was not afraid. She had built her power from nothing, crafted it with her own hands from the bitterness and pain of her past, and she would not let it slip away so easily. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over Ikwere, Ngozi returned to her home. She lit a small oil lamp and sat alone, her mind turning over the events of the day. She was deep in thought, her eyes fixed on the flickering flame, when she heard a faint, eerie whisper in the darkness, a voice that was neither hers nor any she had ever known. "You are playing with fire, Ngozi." Ngozi shivered, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew the voice, though she had never heard it before. It was the voice of the past, of the curses and decisions that had set her on this path. The voice of the witch Adamma, who still watched from the shadows of her dark swamp, her magic twisting through Ngozi's life like the roots of a poison tree. Ngozi swallowed, forcing the fear down. She was not a child anymore, not a victim. She was in control. She would not be undone by ghosts or whispers. But as the night deepened and the lamp burned low, Ngozi could not shake the feeling that the walls were closing in, and the reckoning she had tried so hard to avoid was drawing ever nearer. Coming soon in Chapter 2. Just when it seemed like Ngozi's secret was about to be exposed, she managed to escape, but this is far from the end of her journey. Something much darker is coming in Chapter 2, and the chapter will reveal a threat she never saw coming. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm a new channel that loves storytelling, so if you enjoyed this chapter of Ngozi's journey, hit like, share this story with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be the first to see Chapter 2. Trust me, you won't want to miss the shocking twist that's coming. See you in the next chapter.